Under the merciless New Mexico storm of 1882, Elena Morales runs through blinding rain, lungs burning, silver medallion clutched tight, her dead father's final whisper against the chains closing around her. Debt papers and a forced marriage threaten to erase her forever. Then a lone Apache exile blocks her path with one ice-cold question: shelter or husband? What starts as desperate flight ignites an alliance forged in secrets, ancient carvings, and water that could revive a dying valley or drown everyone in it. This raw story of rebellion, buried truths, and a heartbreaking choice has moved millions to tears at its stunning close. Subscribe right now, comment your city below, and don't stop listening, because the ending will shatter everything you expect. Stay with me. Under the merciless New Mexico storm of 1882, Elena Morales ran as though the sky itself wanted her dead. Lightning split the black over the high plains, flashing white across endless mud and rock, then plunging everything back into wet darkness. Rain hammered her face like buckshot, soaked her wool skirt until it clung like lead, turned every stride into a battle against sucking earth. 22 years old, lungs burning, she gripped the silver medallion so tightly the edges cut crescents into her palm, her father's last gift, his final cryptic warning against the chains already tightening. Red Crossing huddled a few miles behind, its false front saloons and clapboard houses pretending order, while Silas Crow held the ledger in the reins. 3 months earlier, Manuel Morales had staggered home, reeking of defeat and rot gut. The silver claims had played out long ago. The debts had not. Silas offered terms no dying man could refuse. Sign here, keep the roof, pay when fortune returned. Manuel signed with a trembling hand. Then he died quietly in the night, leaving Elena the sagging cabin, a few rusted tools and obligations that transferred to her like a disease. Silas wasted no daylight. The debt was hers now, he explained in that calm, reasonable voice that made men nod and women shrink. The remedy was simple: marriage to Caleb Reed, his lean, watchful shadow. Caleb was 25, clean-shaven, handsome in a cold way, already speaking of the land they would build together once the papers were sealed. Elena had seen the hunger in his eyes, the same tallying stare Silas wore when he calculated interest. She knew the contract's true cost: her labor, her body, her silence, all collateral for grazing rights and water her father had once mentioned in slurred, half-forgotten murmurs. Midnight brought thunder and decision. She tore the document in half, the rip lost in the gale. The pieces fluttered to the dirt floor like broken wings. She wrapped the medallion in oilcloth, shoved a strip of jerky and a dented canteen into her pocket, and slipped out the back while the storm masked her footsteps. Rain lashed her like gravel. Wind tore at her hair. She ran north toward broken country where even the cavalry rode sparingly, praying the downpour would erase her tracks before dawn. Her boots slipped on wet basalt. She caught herself against a boulder, breath ragged, tasting iron and fear. The storm offered no mercy, only indifference, turning arroyos into torrents and trails into traps. Yet she pushed on because stopping meant returning to the house where Silas's men would wait with fresh ink, a preacher in his pocket and Caleb's patient smile. Hooves drummed somewhere behind, muffled by rain but unmistakable. Voices cut through. Caleb's clipped orders, another man cursing the mud. Silas had raised a posse the moment the bed was found empty. Elena pressed into a shallow undercut, heart slamming against ribs, mud sliding cold down her neck. Lantern light swung past, yellow eyes in the dark. She held her breath until the sound receded. Deeper she went, following a narrowing wash. Water rose to her shins, then knees, numbing her legs. She stumbled, fell, rose again, fingers raw from clawing stone. Exhaustion clawed at her edges, but fear kept her moving. The wash ended at a slot canyon, a sheer drop yawning below. She teetered on the brink, arms windmilling, then gripped a jutting rock and hauled herself back. That was when she saw him. A tall figure stood motionless at the slot's mouth, rain streaming off a dark wool blanket draped over broad shoulders. Long black hair tied back, face half shadowed under a battered cavalry hat. A lance rested loosely in his right hand, point down, Not raised in threat, but ready. Apache. The words struck her like a slap. Stories of raids and burned ranches flooded back. Yet this man made no move toward her. He simply watched, eyes calm and unreadable, assessing whether she was worth the trouble. Elena stepped back. Gravel shifted under her heel. His voice carried over the rain, low and rough-edged. Running from men or from chains? Mouth dry despite the water everywhere, she answered. Both. He tilted his head, studying her soaked dress, trembling hands that never released the medallion. Men can be outrun. Chains follow. I'm not asking for help. Didn't offer it. He stepped aside, revealing a faint path climbing the canyon wall. But daylight finds you here. They find you. Your choice. Lightning flashed, carving his features in stark white and black. No pity, no hunger, only cold calculation. Recognition flickered in his gaze, as though he had once stood drenched and cornered too. Elena glanced back at the empty wash. The riders could return any minute. Ahead lay rock and shadow. What's the price? She asked. Truth, no lies, no debts owed in flesh. She nodded once, sharp. He turned and started up the trail without another word. Elena followed, legs shaking, rain mixing with the salt on her cheeks. She did not know his name yet. She did not know if she had traded one cage for another, but for the first time that night she was not running alone. The narrow trail climbed steep and unforgiving, slick with runoff that turned every foothold into a gamble. Elena followed the Apache's broad back, boots scraping against wet sandstone, each step pulling fresh fire into her calves. He moved like he had walked these walls 1,000 times, sure silent, never glancing back to check if she kept pace. Rain eased to a steady hiss, but wind still howled through the slot, carrying the faint metallic scent of wet iron and sage. She clutched the medallion tighter, its weight the only familiar thing left. They reached a ledge barely wide enough for two. He stopped, crouched, and pressed a palm to the rock face. A faint seam opened, natural crack widened by hand over years, revealing a shallow cave no deeper than a horse stall. Inside, the air hung cooler, smelling of dry earth and old smoke. A small pile of dry juniper waited beside a blackened circle. A rolled blanket and leather pouch rested against the wall. No comforts, no excess. Survival pared to bone. He knelt, struck flint, coaxed a tiny flame from tinder. Orange light flickered across his face. Sharp cheekbones, a thin scar curving under the left eye, hair tied with rawhide. He fed the fire sparingly, smoke drawn upward through a natural chimney in the roof. Only then did he speak without turning. Name's Nantan. Elena Morales. Her voice sounded small against the stone. He nodded once as though filing the information away. You're wanted already. Riders will widen their search at first light. I know. She sank against the wall, knees drawn up, sodden skirt pooling dark around her. Warmth from the fire crept slowly into her bones, but the chill deeper than skin remained. Nantan pulled a strip of jerked venison from the pouch and cut it with his knife. Short, efficient motions. He offered half without ceremony. She took it, chewed slowly. Salt and smoke bloomed on her tongue. Hunger sharpened everything. Why risk it? She asked between bites. A white woman in your hideout brings trouble straight to your door. Trouble finds me anyway. He stared into the flames. I choose which kind. Silence stretched, broken only by the pop of burning juniper and distant thunder rolling away. Elena studied him sidelong. No wedding band, no beads or silver that spoke of family ties. A man alone carried ghosts. She recognized the weight in the set of his shoulders. You live like this always? She asked. 3 winters now. He poked the fire. My people call me gone. Whites call me ghost. Suits me fine. She swallowed the last of the jerky. I'm not staying long, just till the hunt cools. His eyes met hers. Dark, steady, weighing. Long enough to learn you can't outrun paper. Or men who write it. The words landed like stones in still water. She looked away, fingers tracing the medallion's faint engravings. My father said something like that once, before the debt took him. Nantan waited. He found water signs, old Spanish marks, while digging silver. Said the desert hides rivers if you know where to look. Silas wanted the knowledge quiet. Father refused. Then the notes came due. Nantan's gaze sharpened. Water signs? Carvings, lines, crosses, arrows on rock. He sketched a few before he died. I thought they were nothing. He rose, crossed to the cave mouth, peered into the night. When he returned, he carried a flat stone the size of a dinner plate, etched with shallow lines, similar curves, similar angles. Like this? Elena's breath caught. She knelt beside him, tracing the grooves with a trembling finger. Exactly like this. Army leaves marks too, he said quietly. Messages on trees, on stone. I never learned to read them. Cost me a brother. The admission hung between them, raw and unadorned. She looked up. His face stayed impassive, but the firelight caught a flicker of old grief. I can teach you, she offered. The letters, the words, if you want. He studied her a long moment. And what do you want? Time. A place to breathe without looking over my shoulder. Time costs. He set the stone down. You stay, you work, you teach, you learn. No promises beyond that. She nodded. No promises. He extended his hand. Calloused, steady. She clasped it. Skin rough against skin. Grip firm but not possessive. The bargain sealed without ink or witness. Outside, the storm had quieted to a low mutter. Inside the cave, the small fire burned steady. For the first time since she tore the contract, Elena felt the knot in her chest loosen. Just a fraction. Dawn would bring riders. Secrets carved in stone waited to be read. And somewhere in the high desert, water older than memory still slept beneath the rock, waiting for someone brave enough, or desperate enough, to wake it. Dawn broke cold and clear, the storm's fury spent, leaving the high desert washed in pale gold light that sharpened every ridge and shadow. Elena woke stiff against the cave wall, fire reduced to gray ash. Nantan already gone, only his blanket folded neatly where he had slept. She rose, stretched aching muscles, and stepped to the ledge. Below, the wash glittered with leftover pools. Far off, dust trails marked riders still searching, but they moved away, thwarted by the night's deluge. Nantan returned before the sun cleared the rim, carrying a small antelope haunch wrapped in hide and a gourd of water from a hidden seep. He dropped the meat beside the rekindled fire without comment, then spread a scrap of canvas on the stone floor. On it, he placed the flat etched rock from the night before and a handful of charcoal stubs. Elena understood the silent invitation. She knelt opposite him, took charcoal in hand, and began. She drew the alphabet first, simple block letters, naming each as she went. A for arrow, B for bone, C for canyon. Nantan watched intently, repeating sounds in his low, deliberate voice, tongue shaping unfamiliar shapes. Mistakes came quick. Frustration tightened his jaw, but he never quit. When the sun stood high, they switched. He led her outside to read the land. A broken twig meant passage recent. Scuffed dust showed direction. Faint hoof prints told numbers and speed. Knowledge traded evenly, bartered without coin. Days blurred into routine sharpened by purpose. Mornings for letters scratched on stone. Afternoons tracking game, or gathering what the desert offered. Prickly pear, mesquite pods, roots that tasted of earth and survival. Evenings they sat by the small fire, Elena tracing the medallion's engravings while Nantan listened to her father's fragmented stories. The old man had spoken of channels buried deep, Spanish work from centuries past meant to cheat the dry years. Marks on rock served as keys, he said, but fear had silenced him before he could explain more. One afternoon, while scouting a narrow side canyon for water, Elena spotted it first. A panel of weathered carvings high on the wall, half hidden by lichen and time. Crosses linked by wavy lines, arrows pointing upward then down, circles bisected by slashes. Her pulse quickened. She called Nantan over. He studied the panel in silence, then touched a finger to the central cross. Same as the medallion, he said, but bigger, older. They returned to the cave with charcoal rubbings. That night, Elena compared them side by side. The patterns aligned. Not perfectly, but close enough to suggest sequence. Excitement edged her voice as she explained. These aren't random. They're directions. Start here, measure paces, turn at the next mark. My father must have found the beginning. Nantan's eyes narrowed. And the end? Water, enough to change everything. He stood, paced to the cave mouth, stared into darkness, thick with stars. When he spoke again, his tone carried weight. Water draws men like blood draws wolves. Silas will kill for it. Army will claim it. Your people already believe the land belongs to paper. I know. She rose too, medallion warm against her chest. But hiding it won't save anyone. Not my father, not your brother. Silence settled heavy between them. Nantan finally nodded once. Then we follow the marks. Carefully. Next dawn they moved out, following the first carving's arrow across broken ground. Terrain grew rougher, deep arroyos, knife-edged ridges, sun that hammered without mercy. Elena's boots wore thin, blisters formed and broke. Nantan taught her to wrap them in strips of hide, to sip water sparingly, to read the sky for coming weather. Progress came slow but steady, each new panel confirming the path. On the fourth day they reached a dead-end box canyon, walls soaring sheer, floor choked with talus. The final carving pointed straight at a massive boulder half buried in rubble. Elena traced the lines again, doubt creeping in. This can't be right. Nothing here but rock. Nantan circled the boulder, probing crevices with his knife. He paused, then pushed against a seam. Stone groaned. A narrow crack appeared, enough for a man to squeeze through if he turned sideways. Inside, darkness swallowed light, but the air felt different, cooler, faintly damp. They lit a torch from dry scrub. The passage widened into a chamber carved by ancient hands. Low ceilings supported by pillars, channels cut into the floor leading to a sealed stone gate etched with the same crosses and arrows. Elena's breath caught. This is it, the headworks. Nantan set the torch in a crack, examined the gate. Locked by design, not rust. Needs the right pressure, the right place. Elena lifted the medallion, aligned its engravings with the central carving. Nothing. She turned it 90 degrees. Still nothing. Frustration rose sharp. We missed something. Nantan studied the panel again, then pointed to a shallow depression beside the gate. Here, the key fits. She pressed the medallion into the hollow. It seated with a soft click. Nantan leaned his weight against the stone beside it. The gate shifted, only inches, but enough for a thin stream of water to seep through, cold and clear, carrying the scent of deep earth. They stared as the trickle strengthened, pooling at their feet, reflecting torchlight like liquid silver. Elena knelt, cupped her hands, drank. The taste was sharp, alive, older than memory. Nantan remained standing, face unreadable. We woke it, he said quietly. Now the world comes looking. Outside, the sun had begun its slide toward evening. Far below, dust rose again. Riders more this time, drawn by rumor or instinct. Silas had not given up. Neither would they. If you're gripped by this tale of hidden water and hard choices, hit that subscribe button now. It keeps stories like this coming straight to you. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Your city might just end up in the next one. The stream kept flowing, small but insistent, promise of more beneath the rock. Elena wiped her mouth, met Nantan's gaze. They had found the secret. Now they had to decide what to do before the hunters closed in. The stream's quiet gurgle echoed in the chamber long after they sealed the gate again, but the desert outside offered no such peace. By the time Elena and Nantan emerged from the box canyon, the sun had dropped low, painting long shadows across the ridges. They moved fast, keeping to gullies and staying below the skyline. Yet the dust plume they had spotted earlier had multiplied. 3 separate trails now converging like fingers, closing on prey. Nantan halted at a high vantage, crouched behind a boulder, and watched. Riders in dusters and wide hats rode in loose formation. Behind them came uniformed cavalry, carbines slung across saddles. Silas Crow sat straight in the lead on his gray gelding, coat flapping, face set in the calm certainty of a man who had already won. Caleb Reed flanked him, scanning the broken ground with the patience of a hunter who knows the quarry has nowhere left to run. They know we're close, Nantan said, voice flat. Someone talked, or they followed the water sign we missed erasing. Elena's stomach nodded. We can't go back to the cave. They'll cut us off. He nodded once. High ground. The mesa north of here. Rough climb, but horses can't follow. They pushed on as twilight thickened, scrambling up talus slopes where loose rocks shifted underfoot and threatened to announce their position with every slide. Elena's hands bled from gripping sharp edges. Her lungs burned with thin, cold air. Nantan moved ahead, testing each step, then reaching back to steady her when she faltered. No words passed between them, only the shared rhythm of breath and effort. They reached the mesa's rim as full dark settled. Below, lantern light bobbed like fireflies gone mad. Voices carried on the wind, sharp and impatient. Silas's tone rose above the rest, ordering a perimeter while scouts fanned out. Elena pressed flat against stone, hard hammering so loud she feared it would carry. Nantan lay beside her, motionless, listening. They'll sweep the canyons at first light, he murmured. We stay put till then. She nodded, though fear clawed at her throat. The medallion lay heavy against her skin, its promise now a beacon drawing death closer. They ate the last of the jerked meat in silence, shared the last swallow of water, and waited while stars wheeled overhead. Dawn arrived gray and merciless. Riders appeared below in greater numbers. Silas had called in favors from every ranch within a day's ride. Elena watched Caleb dismount, kneel and trace something in the dirt. Perhaps a footprint, perhaps a broken twig. He pointed upward. Silas followed his gaze straight to their mesa. Nantan tensed. They've got our scent. Before she could answer, an arrow hissed past, close enough to part her hair, then buried itself in the dirt inches from her boot. She jerked back. Nantan rolled, pulled her down behind cover. Another shaft struck rock and splintered. Not army, he said grimly. Apache, one of mine. Ellen appeared over the edge. A lone figure stood on a lower ridge, tall, painted for war, bow already knocked. Recognition flickered in Nantan's eyes, followed by something darker. Tajo, he said. He never forgave me for walking away from the raid. Tajo's voice carried across the gap, harsh and accusing. You hide with the white woman now? You trade blood for their water? Nantan rose slowly, hands empty. I trade nothing. The water isn't mine to give. Tajo laughed, bitter. Then why guard it? Why not let the whites take it and be done? Because it belongs to no one, Nantan answered. Not you, not them. The next arrow came faster, aimed at Nantan's chest. He twisted, but not quick enough. The shaft struck his shoulder, drove deep. He grunted, staggered, blood blooming dark across his shirt. Elena lunged forward, caught him before he fell, dragged him behind the boulder. His face went gray. Breath came in short, pained bursts. She tore cloth from her hem, pressed it to the wound. Blood soaked through instantly. Hold still. Nantan gripped her wrist, hard. Leave me. Run south. The arroyo will hide you. I'm not leaving you. Her voice cracked, but her hands stayed steady as she bound the wound tight. Below, shouts rose. Silas ordering the climb, cavalry dismounting to follow on foot. Tajo had vanished, mission apparently complete. Elena looked down at the advancing line. Riders fanned out. Carbines glinted. The mesa offered no escape, only a sheer drop on three sides and the slow, inevitable press from below. She pressed her forehead to the stone, exhaustion and despair crashing together. We found it, she whispered, and now it's going to kill us both. Nantan's hand found hers, slick with blood. Not yet. He struggled to his knees, eyes fixed on the horizon where the first rays broke through. Water's awake. Word will spread. Silas can't bury it forever. Elena met his gaze. Doubt warred with the stubborn fire that had carried her this far. The hunters closed in, boots crunching closer, voices growing louder. She glanced at the medallion, then at Nantan's pale face. If they died here, the secret died with them. If they ran, the water stayed hidden, and Silas won anyway. She helped Nantan lean against the boulder, then stood. The wind whipped her hair. Dust stung her eyes. Below, Silas looked up, saw her silhouette against the sky, and smiled the thin, victorious smile of a man who believed the ledger always balanced. Elena's fingers closed around the medallion one last time. She had run far enough. Perhaps it was time to stand. Elena stood on the mesa's edge, wind tearing at her torn dress, the medallion glinting in the first hard light of morning. Below, Silas Crow lifted his hat in mock salute, the gesture slow and certain, as though he had already tallied her surrender in his ledger. Cavalry carbines came up in a ragged line. Caleb Reed stepped forward, hand resting on his holster, eyes fixed on her like she was livestock strayed too far. The air tasted of dust and gun oil. She drew a breath deep enough to steady her voice, then called down, loud enough to carry over the wind. "You want the water? Come see it for yourself." Silas laughed, short and sharp. "Girl, I've got papers that say it's already mine. Step down easy, or we drag you." Elena glanced back at Nantan slumped against the boulder, shoulder bound in blood-soaked cloth. Face pale but eyes still fierce. He gave the smallest nod. She turned again to the men below. "Papers lie, water doesn't. Follow me or keep pretending you own what belongs to the ground itself." A murmur rippled through the riders, ranchers uneasy, soldiers glancing at their officer. Silas's smile thinned. He gestured sharply. Half a dozen men dismounted and started the climb, boots scraping rock. Elena waited until they were halfway up, then moved, not down to them, but along the rim toward a narrow goat trail that dropped into the box canyon. Nantan pushed to his feet, leaning hard on her shoulder, each step a labored rasp of breath. They descended in silence, the pursuers close behind, curses echoing off stone walls. When the group reached the chamber floor, Elena stopped at the sealed gate. She pressed the medallion into the hollow again. The mechanism clicked. Nantan leaned his good shoulder against the stone and shoved. The gate groaned open wider this time. Water surged out, clear, cold, strong enough to wet the boots of the nearest man before he could step back. Silas pushed through the crowd, face darkening as he stared at the flow. "That's impossible." "It's real," Elena said. "My father found the signs years ago. He kept quiet because he knew men like you would turn it into chains. Now everyone sees." A rancher, older, sun-leathered, one of Red Crossing's quieter voices, knelt, cupped water in his hands, drank, then looked up at Silas. "You said the debts covered everything. Looks to me like this water was never yours to claim." Silas rounded on him. "The notes are legal. The girl signed." "She didn't sign anything," Elena cut in. "And the debts you inflated won't hold when a judge sees the forgeries." The cavalry lieutenant stepped forward, brow furrowed. He examined the flowing channel, then the ancient carvings, then Silas's furious expression. "Mr. Crow, if this is Crown land water and you've been claiming private title without survey, that's a federal matter." Silas's composure cracked. He jabbed a finger at Elena. "She's a fugitive. She stole." "She's standing right here," the lieutenant said evenly. "And she's showing us something that could keep half the valley from starving next dry year. Step back, sir." The crowd shifted. Ranchers exchanged glances. A few nodded slowly. Caleb Reed hesitated, hand drifting from his gun, then falling away. Silas looked around, saw the tide turning, and his voice rose in a last desperate pitch. "You let her walk, and you'll all pay for it." No one moved to stop Elena as she helped Nantan back toward the opening. The water kept flowing, steady and indifferent, pooling in the ancient cuts and spilling toward the canyon mouth. Outside, the sun climbed higher, turning the stream into a ribbon of light that reached farther down the wash with every passing minute. Word spread fast. By noon, more people arrived, farmers on mules, a few Apache scouts watching from distant ridges, even Doña Ramona riding in on her old bay with a satchel of herbs. She dismounted, saw Nantan's wound, and knelt without asking permission, unpacking clean linen and salve. "Fool man," she muttered, bleeding like a stuck pig. Nantan managed a thin smile. "Worth it." Elena stood apart, watching the growing circle of faces, skeptical at first, then curious, then quietly awed as they tasted the water and traced the channels back to their source. Silas tried one more argument, voice thinning as listeners turned away. Finally, he mounted his gray and rode out, alone, coat flapping like a flag of defeat. Tajo appeared at dusk, stepping from shadow into firelight. He looked at Nantan's bandaged shoulder, then at the flowing water, then at Elena. No words passed for a long minute. At last he spoke low. "You chose life over vengeance. I called it weakness. I was wrong." Nantan met his eyes. "No one was right. We just kept breathing." Tajo nodded once, then melted back into the dark. Weeks later, the water had carved new paths down the valley, green shoots already pushing through cracked earth. Elena worked the fields beside people who once crossed the street to avoid her. Nantan healed slowly, stayed because the mesa no longer felt like exile. They never spoke of marriage or promises. They simply shared the same fire, the same dawn watch, the same quiet certainty that what they guarded belonged to no single hand. One evening, Elena sat by the channel, bare feet in the cool flow, medallion resting in her palm. Nantan joined her, easing down with a grunt. The sky burned orange and purple. Water murmured like a living thing. "Still think it was worth it?" she asked. He looked at the stream, then at her. "Every scar." She nodded, closed her fingers around the silver. The question that had started under the storm had changed meaning long ago. Shelter was no longer flight. It was standing ground, sharing what the earth gave, refusing to let any man turn life into debt. The water kept running, steady and sure, carrying tomorrow downstream while the high desert learned, slowly, imperfectly, how to live with what it could no longer deny. What did Elena's final stand mean to you? Courage, foolishness, or something in between? And Nantan's choice to stay instead of vanishing again, did it feel like redemption or just survival? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone and love hearing how the story lands with you. A huge thank you for riding this dusty trail all the way to the end. Your time and attention mean more than you know. If stories of hard choices, hidden truths, and water that changes everything pull you in, stick around. We've got more waiting. See you in the next one. Keep listening.